A question I have too. What in human beings? Why do you think it's kind of stayed so long? What do you think is the evolutionary function of laughter for human beings?
I think it's extremely useful. So it's helping us with making and maintaining social bonds right from the start of life. And that's incredibly important. Like I say, your social network, the social bonds you have with other people, unbelievably important to you. And it helps you manage emotional states. So the way people will, when they're with friends or their partners, use laughter together to feel better in difficult situations, that's very effective. You're both, by the end of it, feeling better together and also more bonded. And couples who can do that, certainly the data from married couples shows people who laugh together in stressful situations not only feel less stressed, but stay together for longer. So it's helping your relationship. It's also a really useful, nuanced way of communicating with somebody else. So, being able to laugh to show that you recognise an illusion or you understand, he do be like that, That's really useful. It's useful for sort of managing interactions and making them go more smoothly, even if you're doing so in quite a deliberate way. Robin Dunbar at Oxford has found that if you can get people laughing in the lab, they will tell you more intimate things about themselves because you're sort of reverse engineering that intimacy sense. And actually that, that could be very useful. So there's a study showing that if you look at parts of the world with higher levels of historic migration, so somewhere like Western Europe, you find that laughter and smiling in public interactions, they're both more common and they're less ambiguous in how they're shown. And the argument goes that if you're in a part of the world where you can't assume that you share a language with everybody you meet, then a positive social emotional expression like laughter and smiling become more important because you can use them to manage interactions in a smooth way without having to, such that you can get past the fact that you might not each actually understand everything what the other's saying. And that, whereas somewhere like China, with much lower levels of historic migration, public smiling and laughing is less common and is less. And my PhD student, who was Chinese, said this study is rubbish because people in China laugh a lot. And of course, it's not saying they don't; it's saying in public. This is, in private situations, absolutely certain they laugh a great deal. I know this. They then replicated that in North America, different states in the USA. States with higher levels of historic migration, you get more laughter, you get more smiling in public. So that's trying to show how extremely useful laughter is if you're in situations where you have to be having interactions with people that might have very different languages and backgrounds to you, because you can use it to make things just go more smoothly, even if, I've said you might never see those people again. So it's got tremendous utility, both for like the very closest relationships you have with people and some of the most transient possible ones. It's equally useful for both, I'd argue.
That's so true. And I think I feel that a lot. I think I see that in real life too. I think I want to focus now on the kind of the human condition and like how the role of laughter plays in that human condition. I know we talked a lot about the neuroscience and also like the evolutionary traits from the beginning, from your research too. But I want to now kind of give some observations about how laughter and the role it has in emotion specifically. So do you think, first of all, let's start, I think I want to start here about kind of like looking at the statement. Do you think that laughter is undervalued, especially in the role of science and especially in the role of how we use it to communicate? We understand it in science or in politics or even in like having difficult conversations. Different society doesn't look at laughter as seriously, ironically.
We take it absolutely for granted. We think it's a very kind of a sort of uncivilized behaviour, if anything. So you see that in science. It doesn't feel like a sensible, proper, serious business for a scientist. I have colleagues who think I'm an idiot for studying it. It's like saying I study tinsel or fairy lights or something. So that feels trivial. And in fact, it's interesting, if you go back to the first sort of person to study emotion in this way of thinking about it in a sort of scientific way was actually Charles Darwin. And it's really interesting if you go back to his book on the expression of emotions in man and other animals, because he talked a lot about laughter. He thought it really mattered. He thought it was an expression of joy, and he valued it a great deal. And then in the sort of development of experimental psychology and neuroscience over the next 150 years, we picked up a lot of what he talked about with emotion and the fact that it can be found in other animals. But it was all for stuff like fear and anger and disgust and sadness. We just ignored what he said about laughter. And it doesn't feel serious. It doesn't feel like it could help you understand sort of clinical conditions. And actually, I think it also reflects, in the West, a great undervaluing of laughter in general. So you see this, people always think that stand-up comedians are just riffing. They are never just riffing. Why would they do that? They have worked up that routine over years and months, and they've absolutely honed it to get the best laugh. It is perfectly put together. Exactly, exactly. And there is no way they are just going to I'll just riff this one. It's never just pull it out of my hat. It's just somehow easier to imagine that it's easy for them than that they've really worked hard at doing this, because that's serious work. And you see it in the Oscars. I think the last time somebody in for a funny film got anywhere near the Oscars was the film. Someone was nominated for Best Supporting Actress in the film Bridesmaids. It was 2011. Because it's really hard to make a funny film. That was a very funny film. And it's very hard to be a comic actor or actress. But we sort of imagine something that's easy. It doesn't count. It doesn't count. So and that is quite a big bias in certainly the culture in Western Europe. So if you go back to the kind of medieval period in Western Europe, there was quite a serious argument that Christ had never laughed. With a view, well, would he have ever laughed? And the view that he wouldn't have done, because that is a sort of foolish, trivial, childlike behaviour, whereas, a civilised, thoughtful, serious person would not be laughing.
Wow. That's such an interesting way of looking at the emotion of laughter.
Yeah.
That it kind of, you ascribe it to something that is just kind of silly, and I think it's, as we've learned today, is something way more deeper,
much more
kind of enriching of human beings rather than taking away.
Yes.
It's funny people look at it like that. What I think another question, I think on the back of that too, I want to look at kind of the, if someone is going through a lot of emotional difficulties, and I know there's I think a lot of my generation, we feel like a lot of things are going on in the world. And I think I try to push the kind of the behavior of having laughter, understanding that some things are serious, but some things you can just laugh at, because if you don't laugh at it, it will become too serious and too heavy burdened. So talk to us a little bit more about the role of laughter in healing and getting people through things.
It's, I think, being able to be in a place where you're comfortable to laugh is really important, because that means you don't laugh randomly with just anybody in just any place. So feeling safe enough and with the right people to be able to laugh, those are that just for your well-being, that's really important, full stop, just to sort of, laugh with the people you love, like I was saying about my dad. But there's something very powerful about being able to laugh at something, and I think that's another reason why we fear it a bit as a culture, because actually there's a sort of wildness to laughter, something a bit uncontrolled. People are laughing at something, anything might happen here. They might not be taking any of it seriously, So being able to laugh at a thing can give you power over it. There's an interesting literature on high stress professions and how they use humour, because what you find running through all of them, and that might be the fire service or the police or nursing or medicine, you get very, very dark humour. And that's almost certainly working in 3 ways at the same time. So first of all, you're laughing together, so you're bonding together, and these are jobs where you have to work in a team, so you've got to have close links with the people you work with. They are dark because the humorous topics are often dark because they are keeping out people who are not part of that group. You want them to be shocked. I know it's not very nice, but a lot of those police WhatsApp groups where the police have been sharing the most appalling material, I guarantee you in the moment they were trying to make people laugh. It's not right, but that's what was happening. And the third thing, so they're all interlinked, the third thing is it's giving you a chance to laugh at a thing that's difficult, that is stressful. And you get power over that and sort of maybe more control over it by being able to laugh at it. You're taking away some of its power to hurt you. And that's an extreme example of a high-stress profession, but I think that's true for everyone to some degree. I mean, there's always going to be things that, okay, it's too soon, I don't want to laugh at this, but there's other things that... my father did pass away. My parents lived in France, and we went to the funeral, and this never once occurred to me that, because people drive quite crazily compared to the British, certainly down in the south of France where my parents lived, and the man driving the hearse just set off really fast, and he was doing these crazy overtakes. So like, even in that, really, it was a terribly sad day, but then also like he would have found that genuinely funny.
Yeah,
It was, and it's something we, it's a reason to laugh together. So it's so there's definitely there's some truth to that. And I think I noticed that the NHS has started, certainly in London, they've started part of that kind of social prescribing. They started prescribing doing stand-up comedy classes for people with depression. And I think that's really interesting, because I think that's giving people opportunity to get some power over the stuff that might be hard in their lives, but also to immediately link it to laughter, because there'll be an audience for you.
I completely agree. And I think I've seen the role of that. You mentioned that example. I've seen the role of how laughter plays into my family. Whenever we do have a loss in the family, there is a kind of like, there is obviously a mourning, but I think there's straight away, there's a kind of understanding that the person, this is like, this is how they would have wanted the kind of the situation to be. They wouldn't have wanted us all to keep being, kind of somber. They would have tried to like lift our spirits.
Exactly.
Especially from the older generation looking to the younger, it's like, oh no, come on, keep the smile on your face, keep laughing, keep that spirit, because, don't lose that, and I think that, even implicitly, even in that, it's so fascinating to see the role of laughter. We've talked about how it can be used to bond and, how people connect, but also and that when another end too, when it becomes really difficult, it can also help people lift people back up too. So I think
definitely
fascinating.
Definitely.
That's really, on that point too, what do you think from your research, laughter has taught you about like vulnerability and connection? How people, maybe you mentioned, the kind of a lab experiment, people will be to open up more because of it. What else has it taught you?
I think often when we're talking about laughter, you're talking about connection, you're talking about love. And there's something, so say you don't laugh with just anybody, you don't laugh just anywhere, you laugh with the right people in the right places. And actually, it's made me value that a great deal more. It's obvious when you think about it, but you're of course you love more when you're with your family. Of course you love more when you love with the people you love. But actually, it's not obvious. It's not at all. And also often we can sort of think, well, an evening spent just giggling, that doesn't feel like it's very serious. But that's actually probably one of the more important points in your day, because you're not only feeling better together, but you're increasing your bonds. And when we went into the first lockdown, my son was 13, and it was really scary. And you couldn't get food, and you couldn't buy toilet paper, and everything was, it's just, he was very anxious. And I think everyone was anxious. And at the end of the first day, I said, okay, right, all put away our computers, no more homeschooling, no more work. 5:30, we're going to sit down together and we're going to watch something on television that's funny. And it was absolutely just deliberate, so we'd have a reason to laugh together, because the days didn't contain much of that. And we just started doing that every single day, and we got through like all of Brooklyn Nine-Nine twice and so many things. But in fact, it's like nearly 5.5 years later, and we still do that. If we're all at home in the evening, the first thing we do is we sit down and watch something funny, just so it's now become a family tradition. But it also means that we're having a chance to sit down and laugh together. What else has been going on that day doesn't matter. And that's really, I wouldn't have taken laughter as seriously as that before I started working on it. I would have taken it for granted, which is what we all do.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so important, that understanding. I think that's what I led through my research for this too, but also just, something I've learned from my life. I think in lieu of that too, I think there's so many barriers to laughter. I think we spoke about, some of them are emotional, some of them are social, some of them are just personal. How do you think we can, work to, overcome these barriers to laughter? You can help us in other areas.
Let yourself enjoy it. I think let yourself listen to your laughter. Who do you want to see? Who would make you laugh? Try and spend time with those people, because it's like the laughter is very truthful. We attribute the laughter to people. Well, so so and so is hilarious. He makes me laugh so hard. What you mean is, I absolutely love so and so, and I show that when I'm around him, because I laugh a lot. And so we attribute it to them, but actually it's our own feeling we're describing. And that really matters, so listen to it, take it seriously, make time for it. There's lots of points in your day when you've got to be very serious and grown up and you can't do this at all. But make sure there's time in the day where you do get to have a bit of that.
I think that actually, before we move on to the, because this has been an amazing conversation, and I've got one more question, but I just remembered a question I forgot to ask during what we were talking about before. We were talking about, like, I know you mentioned about forced laughter,
Yeah.
and like just like uncontrollable laughter, and I always found those two very, very hilarious too, because it's like human beings are such a fascinating concept where it's like we can understand some things not funny, but we give it a little
Yeah.
haha, and it's like, you know, and sometimes that would make us laugh.
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So talk to me about that. What is the relationship between forced laughter and like why do we do it? What's the role of that in
I mean,
social?